In the heart of Las Vegas, under the blinding lights of the T-Mobile Arena, a legend convinced he was untouchable, prepared to silence his doubters. A victory celebration turned into a reckoning when a quiet figure from the crowd stepped forward to answer his boast. Mike Tyson wasn't your typical prize fighter. For 20 years he was Iron Mike, the youngest heavyweight champion, feared for knockouts that ended in seconds, and known for crushing men before the bell had finished ringing. His name was intimidation itself. When Chuck Norris accepted Tyson's challenge with nothing but calm silence, the boxing world never realized they were witnessing a trap being sprung. Norris's measured response shattered the myth of invincibility with one strike, unleashing consequences far beyond the ring. What began as showmanship would become legend. Las Vegas would never forget the night a single blow rewrote history, when Chuck Norris dropped the man who swore he could never fall. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The lights of Las Vegas never truly sleep, but tonight they seem to pulse with unusual vigor. The MGM Grand Garden Arena trembled with the roar of 20,000 voices, a living organism of excitement and anticipation. Camera flashes erupted like silent lightning, illuminating faces twisted with the peculiar mix of bloodlust and reverence that only combat sports can summon. Mike Tyson prowled the corridor leading to the arena floor, his compact frame coiled with tension. At 42, he was no longer the baddest man on the planet, but the myth of Iron Mike still clung to him like a second skin. His entourage surrounded him, trainers, yes men, and hangers-on, all feeding the energy that radiated from him in almost visible waves. "They still love you, Mike," said Eddie, his head trainer, voice low and fervent. "Show them why." Tyson's eyes remained fixed forward, pupils dilated with focus. The years had softened his body but sharpened his hunger. This exhibition match against a former heavyweight contender, now safely past his prime, was meant to remind the world of who Mike Tyson truly was. Not the man who had stumbled against Lewis, not the fighter who had quit against McBride, but the destroyer who had terrorized the heavyweight division decades earlier. And now, the announcer's voice boomed through the arena. Making his return to Las Vegas, the former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, Iron Mike Tyson. The crowd erupted as Tyson emerged. The classic opening notes of Tupac's "Ambitions as a Rider" throbbing through the speakers. He moved with the same distinctive swagger, head down. No robe. Simple black trunks. No smile touched his face. Tyson never smiled until after the violence was done. Climbing through the ropes, he felt the familiar rush, the intoxicating cocktail of fear and power that had defined his life. The opponent across the ring, a solid fighter named Marcus Williams, with a respectable 29-7 record, stood with arms crossed, attempting to project confidence. But Tyson saw the truth in his eyes. The man was already beaten. The pre-fight rituals passed in a blur. When the referee called them to the center for final instructions, Tyson refused to touch gloves. "I ain't here to make friends," he growled, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. The bell rang, and Tyson exploded forward with surprising speed for a man his age. Williams attempted to establish a jab, to create distance. But Tyson slipped inside with the same peekaboo style that had made him legendary, punishing Williams with hooks to the body that echoed through the arena. "My God, he still has that speed," gasped the commentator. Williams is already backing up, looking to survive. Midway through the round, Williams attempted to clinch, to slow the onslaught. Tyson responded by driving him into the corner, unleashing a vicious combination that dropped Williams to one knee. The referee gave a standing 8 count as the crowd rose to their feet. Williams survived the round, but the pattern was established. By the third, his face was marked, his confidence shattered. A blistering right hook sent him crashing to the canvas, where he remained as the referee waved off the fight. The arena shook with approval. Tyson stalked the ring, arms raised, the familiar savage grin finally appearing. His entourage flooded the canvas, surrounding him with congratulatory shouts. The victory wasn't surprising. Williams had been carefully selected, but the manner of it stirred something in the crowd. For moments, it felt like the 1980s again. "Mike! Mike! Mike!" The chant rolled through the arena. The promoter handed Tyson a microphone for the customary post-fight interview. "Iron Mike is back," Tyson shouted, voice raspy with exertion and emotion. "They told me I was done. They told me I was finished." His eyes blazed with a familiar intensity. "But I'm still here. And I'm telling you now, there ain't a man alive who can drop me. Not one." The declaration hung in the air, electric with challenge. The crowd's response was immediate, a roar that seemed to make the building itself shudder. In the VIP section, celebrities and fighters reacted with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Floyd Mayweather smirked. Dana White nodded appreciatively at the promotional gold. Ringside commentators exchanged skeptical glances but kept their doubts off Mike. But in the third row, center section, one figure remained motionless amid the surrounding frenzy. Chuck Norris sat with perfect stillness, his weathered face betraying nothing as he watched Tyson circle the ring in triumph. At 68, the martial arts legend and cultural icon no longer appeared in action films or competitions, but the aura of quiet competence had never left him. Beside him, a friend leaned over. "What do you think of that claim?" Norris's eyes remained on Tyson, who continued to work the crowd into a frenzy. "A man's words," Norris finally replied, voice so soft his companion had to lean closer, reveal far more about his doubts than his certainties. Tyson, still riding high on adrenaline and adulation, didn't notice the one man not celebrating his return. But as the arena lights gleamed off the sweat on his shoulders, the seed of what would follow had already been planted. Some challenges, once issued, cannot be withdrawn. Some words, once spoken, set forces in motion that even legends cannot control. Morning sunlight streaked through the blinds of Mike Tyson's hotel suite, falling across the rumpled sheets and scattered champagne bottles. The night had stretched into a blur of celebration, admirers, and the electric high that came from reminding the world who he still was. Tyson sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through headlines on his phone, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Iron Mike still has it," declared the ESPN banner. "Vintage Tyson returns to Vegas." Read another. His social media notifications had exploded. Thousands of comments and shares of his bold declaration. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. His manager, Derek Powell, entered without waiting for an answer, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing that the call was important. "Yeah, he's right here," Powell said, then covered the mouthpiece. "Mike, it's Steve from HBO Sports. They want to talk about last night." Tyson grinned, taking the phone. "What's up, Steve?" "Mike, great show last night. Listen, the clip of your challenge is everywhere this morning. 'No man alive can drop me' is trending on every platform." "That's right," Tyson replied, the familiar swagger creeping into his voice. "I meant every word. That's what I'm calling about. There's been an interesting reaction from someone in the audience last night." Chuck Norris was there. Something shifted in Tyson's expression. "Norris? The movie guy? The martial arts legend, yeah. Someone asked him about your challenge on his way out. His response is blowing up right now. What did he say?" Tyson asked, an edge creeping into his voice. Not much, actually. Just that true strength doesn't need to announce itself. But people are taking it as him accepting your challenge. Social media is going crazy with it. Tyson fell silent, memories stirring. Chuck Norris wasn't just some action star. Before Hollywood, he'd been a 6-time world karate champion, the man who'd helped train Bruce Lee. In the martial arts world, Norris commanded a respect that transcended his later pop culture status. Mike? You there? Steve's voice crackled through the phone. Yeah, Tyson replied, mind racing. So what? So we're thinking, what if we lean into this? The pay-per-view numbers would be astronomical. Mike Tyson versus Chuck Norris, exhibition match. Tyson's laugh held a hollow note. Man, he's got to be pushing 70, 68. But he's Chuck Norris. The guy still trains daily. His condition is legendary. A primal part of Tyson's mind registered something unfamiliar. Doubt. He pushed it away with practiced aggression. Whatever, man. If he wants to step up, I'm here. But I ain't chasing some old man for publicity. After ending the call, Tyson paced the suite, energy suddenly restless. Powell watched him with knowing eyes. What's on your mind, Mike? Nothing, Tyson snapped. Just thinking about appearances this week. Powell nodded slowly. The post-fight press conference is at 2. They're going to ask about Norris. Let them ask. The MGM Grand Conference Room was packed beyond capacity. Cameras and microphones pointed at the stage, where Tyson sat beside the promoter and his team. The initial questions followed the expected pattern reflections on the fight, Tyson's conditioning, future plans. But the room's energy held an undercurrent, everyone waiting for the question they'd come to ask. Finally, a reporter from ESPN rose. Mike, your declaration that no man alive could drop you has gotten a lot of attention, especially after Chuck Norris was spotted in the audience. His comments this morning seemed to question your statement. Any response? Tyson leaned forward, the familiar intensity sharpening his features. Listen, I respect Chuck Norris. The man's a legend in martial arts. But this is boxing. This is different. If he's got something to say to me, he knows where to find me. Another reporter jumped in. Would you consider an exhibition match against him? Tyson's laugh held an edge. Man, I'm not looking to hurt an old man. If he wants to step in the ring, that's on him. But my statement stands. Nobody drops Mike Tyson. Nobody. As the questions continued, none of the reporters noticed the door at the back of the room opening. Chuck Norris entered silently, accompanied by a single assistant. Unlike the flashiness that typically surrounded Tyson, Norris wore simple clothes. Dark jeans. A button-down shirt. No entourage. No fanfare. He took a position against the back wall, arms crossed, listening. It was several minutes before someone noticed him. A whisper spread through the room, heads turning, cameras swiveling. The reporter asking a question faltered mid-sentence as he spotted Norris. Tyson, noticing the disturbance, followed the collective gaze. His expression hardened when he saw Norris standing there. The quiet stillness of the man somehow commanding more attention than Tyson's bombast. The room fell into silence, tension crackling like static electricity. Mr. Norris, the moderator finally said, this is unexpected. Would you like to come forward and address the media? Norris shook his head once. I'm just here to listen. His voice, though not raised, carried through the silent room. The contrast was striking. Tyson, surrounded by his team, microphones, the apparatus of celebrity, while Norris stood alone, needing none of it. Tyson stood abruptly, chair scraping back. Nah. If he came all this way, let the man speak. You got something to say to me, Chuck? Norris regarded Tyson for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his words were measured, deliberate. I didn't come to challenge you, Mike. I came because you issued a challenge to every man alive. He paused. Including me. The room erupted with questions. Cameras flashing. Reporters standing. Norris raised a hand, and improbably, the chaos subsided. I've spent my life in martial arts, he continued, not for glory or to prove anything to others, but because discipline refines character. When I heard your claim, I wasn't offended. But I was reminded that humility is the foundation of true strength. Tyson's jaw tightened. So you're saying I'm not strong? I'm saying strength speaks for itself. It doesn't need declarations. The simplicity of the response seemed to unsettle Tyson more than any direct challenge could have. His hands clenched at his sides. So it's like that? You think you could take me? Norris didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice remained level. I think the question itself misses the point. But if you're asking if I accept your challenge, yes, I do. The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. The promoter's face lit up with dollar signs. Through it all, Norris remained perfectly still. Eyes locked with Tyson's across the room. For Tyson, the world suddenly narrowed to this unexpected confrontation. He'd issued his challenge in the heat of victory, riding the wave of adoration, never imagining it would materialize into this. Chuck Norris wasn't just some random opponent. He was a living legend. A man whose very name had become synonymous with exaggerated feats of strength and skill. 1 week, Tyson said, voice cutting through the chaos. Right back in that arena. No rules, no referees. Just you and me, old man. Norris nodded once, then turned and walked out, the crowd parting before him. No parting shot, no trash talk, just quiet acceptance. As the door closed behind him, Tyson felt something he hadn't experienced in years. The cold finger of doubt tracing his spine. He shook it off with a scowl, turning to the reporters. You all saw it. 1 week. Tyson versus Norris. The biggest exhibition match in history. The headlines would be spectacular. The tickets would sell out in minutes. And social media would explode with predictions and memes. But as the frenzy built around him, a small voice in the back of Tyson's mind whispered a truth he couldn't fully suppress. He had just committed to fight a man who hadn't needed to say a word to establish his presence. And somehow, that silence felt more dangerous than any threat ever could. The 7 days between the press conference and the scheduled exhibition passed in a blur of media frenzy. Sports networks canceled regular programming for round-the-clock speculation. Betting lines opened, then suspended operations when the volume of wagers threatened to crash their systems. The original venue quickly proved inadequate. The event was moved to the T-Mobile Arena with its 20,000-seat capacity. Tickets sold out in 12 minutes. For Tyson, the week brought a strange mixture of bravado and quiet introspection. Publicly, he maintained his characteristic swagger, dismissing Norris as just another old man who'll learn what real power feels like. His training sessions were deliberately open to the media, explosive displays of power on heavy bags. Sparring partners sent reeling from combinations that demonstrated his hands still carried the destructive force that had once terrorized heavyweights. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. But alone in his suite at night, doubt crept in with the persistence of shadow. He found himself watching old footage not of his own fights, but of Norris in his prime. The disciplined movement, the almost mechanical precision. The way Norris had dominated competition, not through raw aggression, but through technique refined to art. "He's just a karate guy," Tyson muttered to his reflection. "This is different." But another part of him remembered the stories how Bruce Lee had considered Norris one of the few men who could genuinely test him, how Norris had developed his own martial art, Chunkukdo, synthesizing the most effective elements from various fighting systems. Across town, Chuck Norris's preparation could not have presented a greater contrast. No media sessions, no public workouts. His team released a simple statement. Mr. Quote, Norris is approaching this exhibition with respect for Mike Tyson's legendary status in boxing. He will be prepared. The absence of information only fueled speculation. Grainy videos emerged of Norris training at his ranch years earlier, demonstrating that even in his 60s, his kicks could still shatter boards. His hands still moved with blinding speed. Former sparring partners gave interviews describing his inhuman conditioning, his absolute precision, his unshakable calm under pressure. The night before the exhibition, Las Vegas vibrated with anticipation. The Strip was a river of people, wearing either Tyson's iconic black shorts or Norris's signature headband. Sports bars throughout the city played marathons of Tyson knockouts and Norris fight scenes. Celebrities arrived by the planeload. Fighters from all disciplines made pilgrimages to witness what many were calling the ultimate clash of combat philosophies. The morning of the event, Tyson woke early, body tense, with familiar pre-fight energy. His ritual remained unchanged after decades: the solitary meditation, the focus exercises that cleared his mind of everything except the coming violence. By the time his team arrived to begin final preparations, the trademark intensity had settled over him like armor. "How you feeling, champ?" Powell asked, setting down a protein shake. Tyson's eyes, already focused somewhere beyond the hotel room, held that eerie detachment his opponents had always found so unsettling. "Ready. Remember the game plan," Powell continued. "He's disciplined, but he's old. Pressure him early. Don't let him settle into a rhythm. Your hands are faster, your power is greater." Tyson nodded. But his mind had already shifted to the approaching confrontation, not just against Norris, but against the doubt that had plagued him all week. Doubt he would never admit to anyone. Across town, in a private gym secured for his exclusive use, Chuck Norris completed his own preparation. No entourage, just his longtime training partner and friend, Aaron Norris, his younger brother. At 68, Chuck's routine had evolved but never diminished. The meditation was deeper now, the physical warm-up more methodical, but the core remained unchanged: discipline as the path to mastery. "You sure about this, Chuck?" Aaron asked, watching his brother move through forms with fluid precision. "Tyson's no joke. Even past his prime, he's dangerous." Chuck completed a final sequence before responding. "It's not about winning or losing, it's about truth." Truth? When a man declares no one can defeat him, he's not stating fact. He's revealing fear. Chuck toweled off, his movements economical. "This isn't about proving I'm better. It's about remembering what strength really means." Aaron nodded slowly. After decades alongside his brother, he understood Chuck's philosophy better than most. This wasn't about ego for Chuck, it never had been. It was about principle. "Just be careful out there," Aaron said. "Tyson doesn't think like you do." Chuck smiled slightly. "That's exactly the point." As evening approached, the T-Mobile Arena filled beyond capacity, the atmosphere electric with anticipation. The preliminary exhibitions hastily arranged to build toward the main event passed in a blur, the crowd's attention divided between the action and the entrances, watching for the legends to arrive. Backstage, Tyson's dressing room buzzed with energy. His team moved with practiced efficiency, wrapping his hands, reviewing strategy, maintaining the cocoon of intensity that had defined his career. Music pounded through speakers, the same aggressive beats that had always channeled his focus into controlled rage. Down the hall, Norris sat alone, eyes closed in meditation. No music, no entourage, just the centered calm of decades of discipline. When a production assistant knocked to give the 5-minute warning, Norris simply nodded once, then returned to his stillness. At exactly 10 p.m., the arena lights dimmed. The crowd, sensing the moment had arrived, rose as one, a wall of sound building from 20,000 throats. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "welcome to an unprecedented event in combat sports history." The production was spectacular. Spotlights sweeping, highlight reels playing on massive screens, celebrities shown in attendance. The commentary team, assembled from boxing, MMA, and martial arts backgrounds, could barely contain their excitement. "First to the ring," the announcer continued. "The martial arts legend, 6-time world karate champion, the man whose name defines unbeatable, Chuck Norris." The crowd erupted as simple, instrumental music began. No flashy entrance, no entourage, just Chuck Norris walking steadily toward the ring. Brother Aaron, slightly behind him, dressed in traditional gi pants and a simple black t-shirt. Norris acknowledged the crowd with a respectful nod, but maintained his focus, his expression betraying nothing. "Look at that composure," one commentator noted. "No hype needed. The man's presence speaks for itself." Norris climbed into the ring with easy grace that belied his age, moving to his corner where he stood, hands at his sides, waiting. The arena lights shifted, and a familiar bass line throbbed through the speakers. The crowd's roar doubled in volume. And now, the former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, the most feared puncher in boxing history, Mike Tyson. Tyson emerged from the tunnel like a force of nature, surrounded by his team, head bobbing to the rhythm, focused intensity radiating from him in almost visible waves. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Norris's stillness versus Tyson's barely contained energy. Simplicity versus spectacle. As Tyson entered the ring, bouncing on his toes, shadowboxing toward the center, the two legends finally stood face to face beneath the blinding lights. The crowd fell into an almost reverent hush, 20,000 people holding their breath at the sight of these mythic figures sharing the same space. No referee called them to center ring. This was no sanctioned bout. Instead, the promoter himself stepped between them, microphone in hand. "Gentlemen, the world is watching. This exhibition has no official rules, no judges, no scorecards. It ends when one of you decides it ends. Are you both ready?" Tyson nodded sharply, never breaking eye contact with Norris. "Born ready." Norris simply inclined his head in affirmation, his calm a counterpoint to Tyson's intensity. The promoter looked between them once more, then stepped back, raising his arm dramatically. "Then let's find out what happens when legends collide." A bell sounded, and just like that, the moment the world had been waiting for arrived. Mike Tyson, the self-proclaimed unbeatable force, facing Chuck Norris, the embodiment of disciplined mastery. Two philosophies, two legacies, about to answer a question no one had thought to ask until 7 days ago. Who would be left standing? The bell's echo had barely faded before Tyson exploded forward, closing distance with the same blinding speed that had once made him the most feared heavyweight on the planet. No feeling-out process. No cautious circling, pure offensive pressure, exactly as the world expected. Norris, calm as still water, shifted slightly, his stance adjusting with minimal movement. The first punch, a thunderous left hook that had separated countless men from consciousness, sliced through empty air as Norris tilted his head just enough for the blow to miss by centimeters. The crowd gasped collectively. Tyson, momentarily off balance, recalibrated and launched a lightning-fast combination jab, right cross, left uppercut, the sequence that had been his signature throughout his career. Norris's defense moved with precision, each block and parry requiring the minimum motion necessary. Economy of movement, honed through decades of practice. Incredible, breathed the lead commentator. Norris isn't just surviving, he's making Tyson miss without even appearing to try. Frustration flashed across Tyson's face as another combination failed to land cleanly. He pressed forward with increased intensity, cutting off the ring, looking to trap Norris against the ropes. A glancing blow caught Norris's shoulder, and a predatory grin spread across Tyson's face. "That's right, old man," he growled, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. "This ain't one of your movies." Norris remained expressionless, feet shifting subtly to maintain proper distance. When Tyson lunged with another barrage, Norris countered for the first time, not with wild aggression, but with a precise jab that caught Tyson flush on the nose, stopping his momentum. The arena erupted. Blood trickled from Tyson's nose, more shocking for its symbolic value than any actual damage. Iron Mike Tyson, bleeding in the first exchange. The impossible made visible. Tyson's eyes widened, then narrowed. The beast that had always lived inside him, the raw, feral hunger that separated him from ordinary fighters, awakened fully. He charged forward with renewed purpose, cutting loose with the violent abandon that had defined his most devastating performances. For a moment, even Norris seemed taken aback by the sheer fury of the assault. A right hand clipped his jaw, a left hook grazed his ribs. The crowd sensed a turning point. Tyson supporters rising to their feet, sensing the kill. "Tyson's found another gear," shouted the commentator. "Norris is in trouble." But then something shifted. Norris's expression, which had remained neutral throughout, focused with subtle intensity. His movement, already efficient, seemed to crystallize into something beyond mere technique. A flowing response that anticipated Tyson's aggression before it manifested. Suddenly, Tyson's punches weren't just missing by inches, they were missing by feet. His balance compromised, his rhythm disrupted. Where Norris had been defensive, he now began countering with surgical precision, straight rights, checking hooks, even a spinning back kick that caught Tyson in the solar plexus and sent him stumbling backward. The crowd's energy transformed, murmurs of disbelief spreading like ripples. "This is unbelievable." The commentator struggled to maintain professional detachment. Norris isn't just surviving Tyson's onslaught, he's dismantling it. As the first round stretched beyond the traditional 3 minutes, no referee, no strict timekeeping in this exhibition. Tyson's initial surge began to ebb. His breathing grew labored, his punches wider, his footwork less precise. The price of age and his opening expenditure of energy began to exact its toll. Norris, by contrast, seemed to grow more fluid with each passing minute. His techniques emerged not as separate movements but as a continuous flow, one action leading naturally into the next. Where Tyson fought with explosive power, Norris moved with the efficiency of water finding its path. After what felt like an eternity to Tyson, a bell rang, signaling a break. No corner teams entered the ring. This was, after all, an exhibition without standard rules. Instead, Both men retreated to neutral corners. The contrast in their conditions, impossible to ignore. Tyson slumped against the turnbuckle, chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face, the trickle of blood from his nose now a small crimson stream. Across the ring, Norris stood straight, his breathing controlled, showing minimal signs of exertion. The crowd buzzed with growing amazement. What many had dismissed as a publicity stunt was revealing itself as something far more significant. A genuine clash of combat philosophies, with the unexpected narrative unfolding before their eyes. In his corner, Tyson's mind raced with unfamiliar doubt. His initial strategy, overwhelm, intimidate, destroy, had been neutralized with such apparent ease that he found himself questioning the foundations of his approach. Glancing across at Norris, standing calmly instead of sitting, Tyson felt something he had rarely experienced in the ring: uncertainty. "What's the matter, Mike?" His inner voice, always his harshest critic, mocked him. "Can't handle an old man?" The thought ignited fresh determination. He was Mike Tyson, damn it. No one made him doubt himself. No one. The bell for the second round sounded, and Tyson emerged from his corner with renewed focus. This time, instead of charging wildly, he stalked forward with measured aggression. The tactical approach that many of his later trainers had begged him to adopt throughout his career. Norris noted the change immediately, a flicker of something like approval crossing his features. He adjusted his own stance subtly, acknowledging the shift in dynamics. What followed was a more technical exchange, Tyson probing with jabs, looking for openings. Norris responding with counters designed to maintain distance and control space. For brief moments, Tyson found success, landing a sharp right to the body, a glancing hook to the temple. But each minor victory was answered. A side kick to Tyson's lead thigh that compromised his balance, a counter right that landed flush on his jaw, snapping his head back. A sweep that nearly took his feet from under him. As the round progressed, the pattern became clear to everyone watching. Tyson possessed the greater raw power, but Norris controlled the terms of engagement. When Tyson attacked, it was on Norris's terms. When Norris countered, it was with calculated precision. "What we're seeing," observed the martial arts expert on commentary, "is the difference between power and control. Tyson can generate more force, but Norris decides where and how that force is applied." The crowd's reaction evolved as understanding spread. The initial bloodlust gave way to appreciation for the tactical chess match unfolding before them. They were witnessing not just a physical contest, but a philosophical one, two approaches to combat, to strength, to mastery, tested against each other. Midway through the round, Tyson connected with his best punch of the fight, a perfectly timed right uppercut that caught Norris as he was stepping in. The impact was audible throughout the arena. Norris's head snapping back, his body momentarily rigid. The crowd erupted, sensing a turning point. Tyson, instincts firing, pressed forward to capitalize on the moment, unleashing a barrage designed to finish. But Norris, defying expectation, absorbed the storm. His defense tightened, his movement economized further. And when Tyson overextended on a wild hook, Norris countered with a perfectly placed spinning heel kick that landed flush on Tyson's temple. The shot didn't drop Tyson, but it staggered him badly. For the first time in the contest, Iron Mike appeared genuinely hurt, legs momentarily rubbery, eyes struggling to focus. The arena fell into shocked silence, then exploded with noise as the implications registered. Chuck Norris had hurt Mike Tyson. The moment marked a psychological turning point. Tyson, who had entered the ring certain of his physical dominance, now faced an opponent who had not only withstood his best, but answered it with interest. The seed of doubt, planted days earlier at the press conference, now bloomed into full-grown uncertainty. As the second round stretched on, Tyson's aggression took on a desperate edge. His combinations, once fluid, became telegraphed. His footwork, already compromised by age and fatigue, grew increasingly flat-footed. Norris, sensing the shift, began to press his own attacks, with more frequency, not with wild aggression, but with calculated pressure. A front kick to create distance. A combination of strikes that flowed from hands to elbows to knees. A takedown attempt that briefly put Tyson on the canvas before he scrambled back to his feet. When the bell sounded to end the round, the narrative had shifted irrevocably. What began as the boxer versus the martial artist had transformed into the legend versus the legend, with the outcome no longer a foregone conclusion in anyone's mind. Tyson returned to his corner, body aching in unfamiliar ways, mind racing with adjustments and doubts in equal measure. Across the ring, Norris once again stood calmly, centered within himself, embodying the philosophy that had defined his approach to combat throughout his life. The crowd, sensing history unfolding before them, buzzed with anticipation for the third round. Whatever happened next, they knew they were witnessing something that transcended sport, a collision of mythic figures that would be recounted for generations. As the bell sounded again, both men moved toward center ring, the question hanging in the air between them: who would impose their will? Whose truth about strength would prevail? The answer, when it came, would shock the world. The bell's sharp tone cut through the arena's electric atmosphere, signaling the beginning of the third round. 20,000 spectators leaned forward as one, sensing the pivotal moment approaching. Celebrities in the front row, fighters, actors, musicians, abandoned any pretense of casual interest, their faces reflecting the same raw anticipation as the fans in the uppermost seats. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension, particles charged with the collective energy of thousands witnessing history unfold. Mike Tyson emerged from his corner with a different energy, a dangerous calm replacing the desperate aggression of the previous round's closing minutes. His breathing had steadied, his movements more deliberate. His eyes, always his most expressive feature, had shifted from frustration to cold calculation, the whites visible all around the dark irises. Those who had followed his career recognized the look. Iron Mike, at his most dangerous, anger crystallized into lethal focus. This was the Tyson who had dismantled world-class heavyweights in less than a minute. The predator who sensed vulnerability and attacked without mercy. "Look at Tyson's eyes," murmured the boxing analyst. "That's the look fighters feared most. He's found his center." Across the ring, Chuck Norris advanced with the same measured presence he had maintained throughout, neither hurried nor hesitant. His posture remained perfect, shoulders relaxed but ready, gaze steady and clear. If he noticed the change in Tyson's demeanor, his own expression revealed nothing, the disciplined neutrality of a man whose emotions served his purpose rather than directing it. Decades of martial philosophy were visible in his movement. Precise, efficient, without excess. They met at center ring, and for several heartbeats, neither man struck. They circled, measuring, each reading the subtle tells in the other's movement, the slight shifts of weight, the almost imperceptible tensing of muscles, the flicker of eyes telegraphing intention. The crowd, momentarily hushed by the tension, waited for the storm they knew would break. 20,000 people held their breath collectively, the moment stretching like an elastic band pulled to its limit. When it came, it was Tyson who initiated, not with wild abandonment, but with the technical precision that had made him not just a puncher, but a master of his craft. A feinted jab to disrupt Norris's rhythm, a subtle step to create angle, then a perfectly executed right hook to the body, followed by a left uppercut that narrowly missed Norris's chin as he tilted away. The combination showcased the boxing acumen that casual observers often overlooked in their focus on Tyson's raw power, the intelligent setup, the creation of openings, the seamless flow from one strike to the next. Beautiful technical work from Tyson, the boxing commentator observed. That's the kind of combination that made him special, not just the power, but the setup, the angles, the craft. Norris responded with efficient movement, his body flowing like water around obstacles. His right forearm blocked the hook to the body, absorbing the impact without losing structure. His upper body swayed just enough to let the uppercut pass, the precision of his defensive movement making difficult evasions look effortless. As Tyson reset his position, Norris countered with a straight right that caught the boxer clean on the cheekbone, not a devastating blow, but clean, scoring. Perfectly placed, a reminder that aggression would be met with precise response. This is boxing at its highest level, breathed the commentator. Tyson may have started as the aggressor, but Norris is answering every question being asked. The economy of movement is extraordinary. The exchange set the pattern for the round's opening minute. Tyson pressing with calculated aggression, Norris countering with disciplined efficiency. Each man finding momentary success, neither gaining decisive advantage. But beyond the physical exchanges, the rhythm of combat began to reveal deeper truths than either had spoken aloud. In Tyson's increasingly measured approach, there was implicit acknowledgement of respect, recognition that wild aggression would not overwhelm this opponent. That victory, if it came, would require intelligence as well as power. In Norris's responses, there was acknowledgement of Tyson's danger, his counters precise, focused, without the slightest margin for error. These were not just athletes competing, these were masters engaged in the highest expression of their craft, each forcing the other to elevate beyond what either might have achieved alone. What we're watching, observed the martial arts commentator, voice low with appreciation, is mutual respect expressed through combat. Two different philosophies, two different approaches, but at their core, a shared understanding of what true mastery requires. Halfway through the round, Tyson found momentary success with an adjustment that revealed his often underestimated boxing IQ. Recognizing Norris's tendency to counter his right hand, he threw a half-committed cross that deliberately invited response. When Norris moved to counter, Tyson was already prepared, slipping the return and delivering a beautifully executed combination that partially broke through Norris's defense, a right hand landing cleanly on the temple. The crowd roared as Norris momentarily lost his perfect positioning, forced to take a half step back to re-establish balance. Blood trickled from a small cut above his eye, the crimson stark against his tanned skin. For the first time in the contest, the martial arts legend appeared genuinely affected, his composure momentarily disrupted. "Tyson lands clean," the commentator exclaimed. "That's the first time we've seen Norris truly rocked in this contest." Ringside, former champions recognized the pivotal moment. This was the opening Tyson had been seeking, the crack in the armor, the momentary vulnerability that his predatory instincts had evolved to exploit. In his prime, this was where fights ended, where the Tyson mystique was forged in the crucible of violence. Sensing opportunity, Tyson unleashed the explosive flurry that had defined his legacy, the same sequence that had separated countless opponents from consciousness. His body coiled and uncoiled with terrifying speed, generating force that seemed to defy his size. Left hook to the body that forced Norris's guard to drop, overhand right aimed at the temple, uppercut threading the narrowing gap in the defense. For a heartbeat, it seemed Norris might be overwhelmed by the sheer violence of the assault, the disciplined martial artist finally succumbing to the primal fury that had made Tyson a singular force in combat sports. The crowd sensed the turning point, rising to their feet in anticipation of the spectacular finish that had defined so many Tyson victories. This was the moment they had paid to see. Iron Mike, unleashed, the destroyer who had terrorized the heavyweight division in his prime. "Tyson senses blood," the lead commentator shouted over the roaring crowd. "He's looking for the finish." But then came the moment that would be replayed millions of times in the years that followed. Analyzed frame by frame, discussed in dojos and boxing gyms around the world, the single exchange that would enter combat sports lore alongside Ali's phantom punch and Silva's front kick. As Tyson committed fully to a devastating right uppercut, the signature punch that had claimed so many victims, his weight shifting forward, body torquing to generate maximum force, Norris didn't just evade. In a display of timing that bordered on prescience, he countered with a move so perfectly executed it appeared almost supernatural to casual observers. Slipping the uppercut by millimeters, his body angling just outside the path of Tyson's fist, he delivered a spinning back fist that connected with Tyson's jaw with surgical precision. The impact froze time. 20,000 breaths held simultaneously. The sound of the strike echoed through the sudden silence, the unmistakable thud of perfect contact. Tyson's eyes went blank, the fearsome focus instantly replaced by the vacant stare of a man whose consciousness had been temporarily severed. His body, so fluid and explosive moments before, suddenly rigid. For a fragment of a second, he remained upright. Iron Mike, the man who had declared himself undroppable, suspended between consciousness and darkness. Then, like a great tree finally yielding to gravity, Mike Tyson fell. The motion seemed to unfold in slow motion. First the slackening of muscles, then the buckling of knees, the forward tilt of the upper body. He hit the canvas with the finality of myth collapsing into reality. Body slack. The fearsome aura that had defined him dissolving in the harsh arena lights. The sound of his fall echoed through a stunned silence, the dull thud of a legend meeting physical reality. The sharp punctuation at the end of a declaration that had seemed untouchable. In that moment, something more than a man fell. A mythology collapsed. An image of invincibility that had survived prison, defeat, and disgrace. Finally shattered by the physical manifestation of a competing philosophy. Quiet discipline. Overcoming loud proclamation. Chuck Norris stood perfectly still, making no gesture of triumph, no celebration, no raised arms, no roar of victory, no parading around the fallen opponent. His face betrayed nothing but focus. Perhaps the faintest hint of compassion as he watched medical staff rush toward the fallen legend. The contrast could not have been more stark, the martial artist's composed stillness beside the boxer's crumpled form. Two approaches to strength made visibly manifest. "Look at Norris," the martial arts commentator said softly, voice thick with emotion. "Not a hint of celebration. That's a lifetime of discipline on display. Victory as merely a waypoint, not a destination." The referee, though unnecessary for this exhibition, instinctively moved to Tyson's side, professional instincts overriding the unusual nature of the contest. Medical personnel converged on the fallen fighter, their practiced movements a choreography of concern. Tyson stirred, consciousness returning in fragments, eyes blinking with confusion that slowly transformed into the dawning realization of what had occurred. Mike Tyson, Iron Mike, the self-proclaimed undroppable, had been dropped. Not just hurt or staggered, but dropped clean, rendered momentarily unconscious by a single, perfectly executed strike. The very thing he had declared impossible 7 days earlier had materialized in front of 20,000 witnesses, captured by hundreds of cameras, soon to be viewed by millions around the world. The silence broke. A roar erupted from 20,000 throats, not in bloodlust but in awe, in witness to something they had believed impossible. The sound rolled through the arena like physical force, a collective expression of disbelief and recognition. This was more than a sporting moment, it was witnessing the impossible made real. The sort of event that spectators would recount to their grandchildren decades later. I was there when Chuck Norris dropped Mike Tyson with one shot. Phones captured the moment from every angle, flashes illuminating the scene like lightning, immortalizing what would become the most viewed sports clip in social media history. In the press section, journalists abandoned professional detachment, standing with mouths agape, knowing they were witnessing something that transcended typical reporting. "Oh my God." The lead commentator's professional detachment finally shattered, voice cracking with emotion. "Chuck Norris has dropped Mike Tyson with a single strike. I never thought I'd live to see this. In 30 years of calling fights, I've never witnessed anything like it." In the ring, Tyson pushed himself to hands and knees, head hanging low between his shoulders as he gathered himself. Blood trickled from his lip where his teeth had cut the inside of his mouth, dripping onto the canvas in small crimson circles. His entourage moved to enter the ring, concern evident on their faces, but he waved them off with a sharp gesture. One gloved hand raised in unmistakable command. This moment was his to bear alone, the public reckoning with a truth he had denied. With visible effort, he rose to his feet, legs unsteady, but refusing assistance. Pride still evident in every line of his body. The same fierce independence that had defined his career, now manifesting in his refusal to be helped up. His eyes, clearing now, fixed on Norris across the ring. Not with anger or resentment, but with something more complex, more profound. Recognition. Respect. The beginning of understanding. "Look at Tyson," murmured the boxing commentator. "No excuses. No complaints. Rising on his own terms. That's a warrior's response." Across the ring, Norris remained where he had been, making no move to capitalize on the knockdown. No attempt to press his advantage. The martial arts legend understood something deeper was unfolding, not just a physical contest, but a moment of truth that transcended competition. His stillness conveyed respect for Tyson's process, allowing the fallen legend the dignity of his own recovery, his own reconciliation with what had occurred. Tyson, finally steady on his feet, took a deep breath, chest expanding with the effort. The crowd, sensing a pivotal moment, fell quiet again. 20,000 people, moments earlier roaring in shock and excitement, now hushed in collective recognition of the gravity unfolding before them. This wasn't just the aftermath of a knockdown, it was the resolution of a philosophical question posed 7 days earlier. For several heartbeats, the two men regarded each other across the distance that separated them, not just physical space, but philosophical worlds. Tyson, the embodiment of explosive power, aggression made manifest, the philosophy that strength announces itself loudly. Norris, the personification of disciplined technique, the belief that true mastery reveals itself through action, not proclamation. Then, with deliberate steps, Tyson crossed the ring toward Norris. Each footfall seemed to carry weight beyond the physical. Each step a visible journey from one understanding to another. His expression had transformed. The mask of aggression replaced by something rarely seen in public. Vulnerability. Respect. The humility of a warrior acknowledging truth. The hardness that had defined his public persona for decades softened, revealing the human being beneath the myth, a man capable of growth, of recognition, of evolution. He extended his gloved hand. Norris took it without hesitation, his grip firm, respectful, neither dominant nor submissive. Equal warriors acknowledging each other's path. The arena erupted once more, understanding they were witnessing not just the resolution of a physical contest, but a rarer, more valuable moment. A legend embracing a truth greater than his own mythology. The roar contained multitudes, appreciation for the spectacle, respect for both competitors, recognition of the profound nature of what they had witnessed. This wasn't just entertainment, it was illumination through combat, truth revealed through physical dialogue. No words were exchanged between the men. None were necessary. The handshake spoke volumes that no microphone could capture, communicating on a level that transcended language. In that silent acknowledgement, both men honored something beyond winning or losing, the eternal principle that true strength never needs to announce itself, that mastery is revealed through action, not declaration. In their grip was mutual recognition. Tyson acknowledging the reality that had shattered his proclamation. Norris honoring the courage it took to face that reality without excuses. Two different paths converging in a moment of shared understanding. Tyson nodded once, the gesture containing a universe of unspoken acknowledgement, then turned and walked toward the ropes, his team rushing to meet him. No tantrums, no excuses, no attempts to diminish what had occurred. Just the quiet dignity of a warrior accepting reality on its own terms. Norris remained center ring for a moment longer, his presence a physical embodiment of the philosophy that had guided him for decades. Then he moved quietly toward his own corner, where his brother waited with a simple nod of acknowledgement. No wild celebration necessary. No external validation required. The victory wasn't a culmination, but merely another step on an endless path of discipline and growth. That handshake, observed the martial arts commentator, voice soft with appreciation, might be more significant than the knockdown itself. Two legends, two different approaches, meeting in mutual respect. That's the essence of martial arts philosophy right there. As medical staff examined Tyson and officials conferred about the official outcome of this most unofficial of contests, the world beyond the arena was already exploding with the news. Social media platforms crashed under the volume of activity, unable to handle the millions simultaneously sharing and commenting on what they had witnessed. Sports networks interrupted all programming with breaking news alerts. The moment transcended sport, becoming instant cultural mythology, not just a physical contest, but a parable made flesh, a philosophy proven through action. Chuck Norris had done the impossible, not just defeating Mike Tyson but dropping him with a single strike, answering the boast that no man alive could do so. The spinning backfist that connected with Tyson's jaw would be analyzed in frame-by-frame detail, would become the subject of countless breakdowns, would be studied in dojos and gyms around the world. How had a 68-year-old martial artist generated enough power to drop one of the most durable heavyweights in boxing history? The technical answer: perfect timing, ideal placement, catching Tyson moving into the strike, would be discussed endlessly. But those who understood combat at its deepest level recognized the true significance lay beyond technical analysis. It wasn't about who was stronger or more skilled. It was about which truth prevailed, whether strength comes from what you claim or from what you simply, quietly are. It was about two different approaches to power, to mastery, to life itself, tested against each other in the most direct way possible. And in that test, the quiet discipline that had defined Chuck Norris's lifetime in martial arts had answered the loud proclamation that had characterized Mike Tyson's career. Not through words or arguments or debates, but through the irrefutable physical reality of action, the most ancient and honest form of truth-telling humans possess. In a world increasingly dominated by those who shout loudest, who boast most boldly, who proclaim their greatness most aggressively, a different message had been delivered with undeniable clarity. True strength doesn't announce itself. It simply acts when the moment requires. Dawn broke over Las Vegas, painting the desert city in hues of gold and amber. Morning light spilled across the strip, transforming the garish neon into softer silhouettes against the awakening sky. The streets, littered with evidence of the previous night's revelry, gradually stirred to life. Hotel cleaning crews discovered discarded tickets, commemorative programs, and empty champagne bottles, physical remnants of what many were already calling the most significant exhibition match in combat sports history. News vans lined the entrances to major hotels, reporters delivering breathless updates to morning broadcasts. On street corners, vendors had already produced hastily made T-shirts bearing images of the knockout, the entrepreneurial spirit of Vegas never missing an opportunity. Digital billboards that had advertised the event now displayed freeze frames of its conclusion. Tyson falling, Norris standing, composed a modern tableau that had already embedded itself in cultural consciousness. In his suite at the Bellagio, Mike Tyson sat alone on the balcony, watching the sunrise transform the desert landscape. The physical pain of the previous night, the bruised jaw, the slight swelling around his left eye, the aching body was nothing compared to the internal reckoning taking place. For a man whose identity had been built around invincibility, around being the most feared fighter alive, last night had forced a confrontation with reality that no amount of denial could erase. He ran his tongue along the inside of his cheek, feeling the spot where his teeth had cut into flesh when Norris's strike landed. The physical reminder of a moment that had shattered more than just his equilibrium. It had collapsed a lifetime of self-mythology, of carefully constructed identity. His phone, placed face down on the table beside him, had been buzzing continuously since he'd awakened. The screen showed 57 missed calls, over 100 text messages, notifications from every social media platform. Calls from his team, from media outlets offering exclusive interviews with seven-figure payments attached. From celebrities and fellow fighters, offering support or seeking statements. He had ignored them all, needing this moment of solitude to process what had occurred. The footage was everywhere. Despite frantic efforts by his management team to control the narrative, just an exhibition, Tyson wasn't taking it seriously. Slipped rather than knocked down, the visual evidence was irrefutable. From every angle, in high-definition clarity, in slow-motion detail that exposed every microsecond of the encounter. Iron Mike Tyson, the man who had declared no one alive could drop him, laid flat by Chuck Norris. The breakfast he'd ordered sat untouched on the table, steam no longer rising from the coffee. He'd been sitting in the same position for nearly 2 hours, watching the city wake below him, feeling strangely disconnected from the world, still processing the events he'd lived through. There was a peculiar freedom in having your worst fear realized once the thing you dreaded most has happened. What else remains to fear? A knock at the door finally broke his reverie. 3 short raps, measured and precise. Not the continuous pounding of reporters or the hesitant tapping of hotel staff. He considered ignoring it. But something in the pattern, the controlled economy of the sound, gave him pause. "It's open," he called, not turning from the view. The door opened and closed softly. Footsteps approached, unhurried but purposeful, crossing the suite's living area toward the balcony. Tyson didn't need to look to know who had come. The footfalls themselves told the story, deliberate, balanced, the product of decades spent mastering the relationship between body and space. Chuck Norris stepped onto the balcony, the morning light catching the silver in his beard. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a button-down shirt, boots worn with character, the same unassuming presence that had contrasted so sharply with Tyson's flamboyance the previous night. No entourage followed him, no cameras, no handlers or agents. Like everything about the man, his arrival was direct, unadorned, sufficient unto itself. "Mind if I join you?" Norris asked, his voice carrying the same calm it had maintained throughout their encounter. Tyson gestured to the empty chair beside him. For several minutes, both men sat in silence, watching the city below. 2 legends suspended above the world, that was still processing their collision. The quiet between them wasn't awkward but contemplative. The silence of men who had communicated most profoundly through action, and now found words almost superfluous. "They're calling it the silence heard around the world," Norris finally said, a hint of wry amusement in his voice, as he nodded toward a digital billboard visible in the distance, displaying the moment of the knockout. Tyson's laugh held no humor. "Yeah? What else they saying?" "Everything you'd expect. That I got lucky. That you're past your prime. That it was staged." Norris shrugged, the gesture containing neither defensiveness nor concern. "People need stories they can understand. The truth is usually too simple for headlines." Another silence stretched between them, more comfortable than the first. Below, a convoy of media vans moved along the strip, hunting for the next development in a story that had captivated global attention. Both men watched their passage with detachment, as if observing a phenomenon that concerned others entirely. "I believed it. You know," Tyson said eventually, still looking out over the city, voice softer than his public persona ever allowed. "When I said no one could drop me, wasn't just talk, wasn't just promotion. I believed it." Norris nodded, understanding evident in the gesture. That's why it needed to happen. Tyson turned to him then, really looking at the older man for the first time since he'd entered. The morning light revealed details he hadn't noticed in the ring, the fine lines around Norris's eyes that spoke of decades of discipline and focus. The calm steadiness of his gaze, the comfortable way he occupied space without attempting to dominate it. This was not the cartoon superhero of internet memes or the action star of movies, but the martial artist who had existed before and beneath those public images. "You came to the fight because of what I said. Not for money, not for fame. Because of the claim." "Yes." "Why? You got nothing to prove. You're Chuck Norris, man. Your reputation's secure." Tyson's question held genuine curiosity, a desire to understand something fundamental about the man who had reshaped his understanding of himself. Norris considered the question, his eyes reflecting the thoughtfulness that had always separated him from the caricature the internet had created of him. He took a sip from a water glass he'd brought with him before answering. "It wasn't about my reputation," he said finally. "It was about truth. Not my truth or yours. Just truth." He paused, gathering thoughts that seemed to emerge from decades of reflection. "I've spent my life in martial arts, Mike. Not to become famous or to prove I'm better than others, but because the discipline reveals character. When I heard your claim, what I heard wasn't arrogance. I heard fear." Tyson stiffened slightly, instinctive defensiveness rising, but Norris continued, his tone free of judgment or condescension. This wasn't an accusation but an observation, offered with the same direct honesty that had characterized his fighting style. "Not physical fear. You've never had that. But the fear all fighters know that the myth we create might not be real. That we might not be who we claim to be." He looked out toward the mountains beyond the city. "I've known that fear too. Everyone who steps into combat does." The words hung in the air between them. Tyson's first impulse was anger, denial, the reflexive rejection of vulnerability that had protected him throughout his life. But something deeper recognized the truth being offered, a truth that resonated with his own most private thoughts. "When a fighter announces no one can defeat him," Norris continued quietly, "he's not stating fact. He's revealing doubt. The need to say it aloud betrays the fear that it might not be true." Tyson was silent for a long moment, absorbing this. The insight cut through layers of defense built over a lifetime, touching something essential he had never articulated even to himself. When he finally spoke, his voice held a rawness rarely heard from the fearsome boxer, a vulnerability that few had been permitted to witness. All my life, man. Intimidation was my edge. Make them fear you before the first punch. Make them doubt themselves. He shook his head slowly, gaze fixed on some middle distance, as memories scrolled through his mind. Make them believe you're something more than human, something they can't hurt. He paused, the admission difficult even now. Never thought about what that said about me, about what I was afraid of. Fear has its place in fighting, Norris acknowledged, voice carrying the wisdom of someone who had spent decades examining the psychology of combat. But it's like any weapon, dangerous when pointed inward. When we fear our own vulnerability so much that we build fortresses of reputation to hide it, we become prisoners of our own mythology. Tyson nodded slowly, recognition dawning in his eyes. And then you spend your whole life defending the myth, making sure nobody sees behind it. He shook his head. Exhausting, man. The irony, Norris said with the ghost of a smile, is that acknowledging vulnerability is the path to true strength, not denying weakness, but accepting and working through it. They fell silent again, the conversation shifting to something beyond words, a recognition between warriors that transcended their different paths, different styles, different philosophies. Morning traffic increased on the streets below, the city accelerating into full wakefulness. But on the balcony, time seemed suspended in a moment of shared understanding. What now? Tyson asked eventually. Everyone's waiting for statements, for explanations. My team's already spinning stories about how it wasn't really a clean hit, how I wasn't prepared, how it was all just entertainment. He gestured toward his silent phone. They've been calling all morning with strategies, narratives, ways to protect the image. What do you want to say? Norris asked, turning the question back to its source. Tyson considered this, genuinely weighing the question against the complex tangle of pride, public image, and newly emerging truth. The old Mike would have made excuses, would have maintained the illusion of invincibility at all costs. But something had changed in the ring last night. A truth had been exposed that no amount of posturing could bury again. The myth had been punctured, and through that opening, something new could emerge. I want to say I got dropped by Chuck Norris, he said finally, a hint of his familiar grin returning, but tempered with newfound self-awareness. Simple as that. No excuses, no bull. He caught me clean, and I went down. Maybe add that it's the best thing that could have happened to me. The admission seemed to lighten something in him, a burden set down after being carried too long. Norris nodded, approval in his eyes. Truth has its own power, Mike. Greater than any myth we build around ourselves. There's freedom in it. As the morning progressed, the city below them continued to wake, unaware of the quiet conversation taking place above. Two legends, once separated by their approaches to combat, now connected by a shared understanding that true strength lies not in what you claim about yourself, but in what you're willing to recognize as true, not in the fortresses built to protect vulnerability, but in the courage to acknowledge it. 3 hours later, the press conference that the sports world had been waiting for began in the Bellagio's grand ballroom. The room was packed beyond capacity. Cameras from every major network trained on the podium, reporters from every major outlet jostling for position, the energy electric with anticipation. Expectations ranged from manufactured excuses to heated accusations, the typical aftermath of any shocking upset. Media consultants had already prepared their analyses, ready to dissect whatever narrative emerged. What they witnessed, instead, became as viral as the knockout itself. Mike Tyson entered first, his team conspicuously absent. No entourage, no managers, no handlers, just the man himself. He wore no sunglasses, no cap to hide his expression. Just the same intensity that had always defined him, but tempered now with something new, something that the most perceptive observers recognized as authenticity. The slight swelling around his left eye was visible, unobscured, a physical testament to what had transpired. He approached the microphone alone, standing before the assembled media with a presence that commanded attention without demanding it. "I know y'all expecting some kind of excuse," he began, his distinctive voice carrying through the silent room. "Ain't gonna be none. Last night I said no one alive could drop me. Chuck Norris proved me wrong. Clean shot, perfect timing. I went down." A murmur ran through the assembled media, the unexpected honesty catching them off guard. Reporters exchanged glances, discarding prepared questions that suddenly seemed irrelevant in the face of such straightforward admission. "All my career, I talked about being the baddest man on the planet, about being invincible." Tyson paused, gathering thoughts that clearly represented a new understanding, a perspective shift visible in real time. But real strength isn't about what you say. It's about what you do. And sometimes, it's about admitting when someone else did it better. As if on cue, Chuck Norris entered from the side of the room, his arrival causing another ripple of surprise through the assembled press. Without fanfare, without announcement, he walked to stand beside Tyson at the podium. The contrast remained striking. Tyson's barely contained energy beside Norris's composed stillness. But now it seemed complementary, rather than contradictory. Two different expressions of the same fundamental truth. "I've been in martial arts for over 50 years, Norris said, his voice quiet, yet reaching every corner of the hushed room. "And the greatest lesson I've learned is that true mastery begins with humility. What Mike demonstrated today takes more courage than any fight." The simple statement carried weight beyond its words, an acknowledgement of the rarer, more difficult victory Tyson had achieved over himself. Questions exploded from the reporters, the professional restraint momentarily abandoned in the face of this unexpected development. Cameras flashed. Voices overlapped. The room transformed into controlled chaos as every outlet sought their soundbite, their exclusive angle. Both men held up hands in the same gesture, the synchronized movement silencing the room again through sheer presence rather than volume. "One last thing," Tyson said. "People keep asking if we're going to have a rematch. The answer is no. Some things happen once for a reason. Last night wasn't about winning or losing. It was about truth." He glanced at Norris. A moment of shared understanding passing between them. "And that's been settled." With that, both men stepped back from the podium and walked out together, side by side, ignoring the barrage of questions that followed them. No prepared statements, no carefully constructed narratives, no manufactured drama, just the simple truth, offered without embellishment. The image Tyson and Norris, walking in unison, neither celebrating victory nor lamenting defeat, would become as iconic as the knockout itself, reprinted on magazine covers and analyzed by cultural critics for its symbolic power. Outside, away from the cameras and microphones, in the relative privacy of a service corridor, the two legends paused before parting ways. No handlers, no witnesses, just two men who had communicated most profoundly through the ancient language of combat. "What will you do now?" Norris asked, the question holding genuine interest rather than mere politeness. Tyson considered this, weighing possibilities that seemed newly available, paths that had opened where before there had been only the narrow route of maintained mythology. Then he smiled a genuine smile, free of the performative intensity he had maintained for decades, reaching his eyes in a way that transformed his entire countenance. "Think I'm going to spend some time being quiet?" he said. "See what I can learn from that." The statement contained volumes, a willingness to listen rather than proclaim, to observe rather than dominate, to learn rather than prove. Norris nodded, understanding the profound shift this represented. The new journey being undertaken. The strongest statement is sometimes silence. They shook hands once more. The grip containing mutual respect, mutual recognition, mutual acknowledgement of truths discovered through their collision. Then they turned in opposite directions, two paths, different in style but united in purpose, each man carrying forward a truth greater than any myth. In the weeks and months that followed, the story evolved from sports sensation to cultural touchstone. Beyond the memes, the endless replays, the commentary and analysis, people recognized something profound in what had transpired. A rare moment of genuine truth in a world often dominated by illusion and self-promotion. The footage became shorthand for authenticity overcoming hype, for substance defeating style, for quiet mastery prevailing over loud proclamation. Mike Tyson, true to his word, stepped back from public life for a period of reflection. He declined the avalanche of interview requests, the reality show offers, the book deals promising millions for his exclusive story. Instead, he retreated to his training facility, focusing on the fundamentals that had been his foundation, approaching them with new awareness. When he re-emerged months later, those close to him noted a transformation. The legendary intensity remained, but it was channeled differently, focused inward toward growth rather than outward in intimidation. "He listens more now," observed a longtime training partner. "Watches. Thinks before he speaks. Still Mike. Still that presence. But different. More. At peace with himself." Chuck Norris returned to his ranch in Texas, maintaining the same disciplined routine that had defined his life for decades. If the world expected him to capitalize on his newfound viral fame, they were disappointed. He gave no additional interviews, made no appearances to discuss the event, declined all offers for commercials playing on the knockout. The action had spoken. Words were unnecessary. When asked by a persistent reporter who tracked him to a local restaurant, his response was characteristically direct. Some moments should be left to speak for themselves. The footage of their encounter became the most viewed sports clip in history. Studied by fighters across disciplines, referenced in popular culture, analyzed by psychologists examining the nature of confrontation and truth. Coaches showed it to young fighters not just as a technical study, but as a philosophical lesson about humility, about the dangers of proclamation, about the difference between appearing strong and being strong. But perhaps the most telling aftermath came 6 months later, when Tyson agreed to an in-depth interview with a major sports network. The conversation covered his entire career, the meteoric rise, the spectacular fall, the personal demons, the professional triumphs. When they finally reached the topic of the Norris exhibition, the interviewer leaned forward with practiced intensity, voice dropping to the tone reserved for significant revelations. "Looking back now, what would you say you learned from that night?" Tyson was quiet for a moment, the thoughtfulness that had emerged in him now evident in his measured response. Gone was the rapid-fire delivery, the impulsive declarations. In their place, a considered reflection that gave weight to each word. "I learned that strength doesn't need announcements," he said finally. "True power, the kind that lasts, it whispers, man. It doesn't shout." He gestured with hands that had once been among the most dangerous weapons in sports. "All those years I was screaming how tough I was, how scary, how nobody could touch me. But the real ones, the ones with nothing to prove, they just show up and do the work. No talk necessary." The interviewer pressed, seeking drama, controversy, the emotional hook that drives ratings. Do you regret making the claim that no one could drop you? Tyson smiled, shaking his head, the expression holding none of the bitterness such a question might once have triggered. Nah, I needed to say it to learn why I shouldn't have to. He leaned back, comfortable in a new skin. Sometimes you gotta be wrong out loud before you can be right for real. Across the country, watching the interview from his home, Chuck Norris nodded silently in agreement. The lesson had been remembered. The truth had prevailed. Not through words or declarations, but through the silent eloquence of action, the most honest language humans possess. In the end, it wasn't about who was stronger or more skilled. It wasn't about age or background or reputation. It was about which philosophy proved more enduring. That true strength announces itself loudly, or that real power reveals itself through quiet mastery. The answer, like Tyson falling to the canvas, had landed with undeniable finality. Some truths require no announcement. They simply are. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.